Evening. How are you? Good. So good to see each and every one of you. So thankful for the opportunity, and I am so thankful to be just called Aurora's dad. If you have the same opinion of her as I do, I'm pretty proud to be called that. And I want to tell you as we begin how much we appreciate the opportunity to be here, give you an update on the work that we have been doing and the work that we are trying to do right now, and then the work that we're looking to do. And I have some major goals right now that I want to put before you if I can. And tonight, listen, if you leave here and you come away with nothing else, and maybe you can do nothing else, but just pray for us. Please do that. It's so good to see the Hodems here. Hey. All right, we're going to start. Most of you do not know what we do. And so I want to kind of explain how we got to where we're at in a mission field, and we'll go from there. In 2010, I had the opportunity to go to Kathmandu, Nepal, and teach at a preaching school there. And the very first day that I was there at the preaching school, I had 26 students. All the students were lined up at the end of the first course in the morning, and there was this little break, and they all lined up to shake my hand. And as they did so, each student would come up and he would shake my hand and he would ask me if I would support he and his family. And then he would say this, because my family's home starving. And I would say, that's terrible. And I would think to myself, man, I want to help them. But if I help this guy and the guy behind him has the same request and I don't help him, then I'm a bad guy to that guy. And I thought, I'm in trouble here. So I just calmly asked, I said, is everybody going to kind of make the same request? And they all said yes. And I said, okay, everybody sit down. I said, I have a couple of questions for you. I said, why is everybody's family home starving? They said, well, we're very poor. They acted like that was a dumb question. And I said, okay, well, now I grew up on a farm in western Oklahoma. I said, why is your family in such an impoverished state? I mean, I was very poor growing up. And I mean, you might not believe it now, but I had a dirt floor in my bedroom. I did not know that until I was about 10 years old, and I was vacuuming, and we had a carpet in there that my mom had laid on top of dirt. And I was vacuuming, and she had just bought one of those Amway vacuums that was cyclonic, and you could see in it, and you could see it spinning around. And I'm over there vacuuming, and I could see that dirt going, and I just thought that was the greatest thing. And I kept vacuuming, it kept filling. I'd go outside and dump it, and I'd vacuum. I'd go outside and dump it, and I'd vacuum. Well, finally, I went and told my mom. I said, Mom, it just keeps filling up. And she said, well, go pull the carpet back a little. So I did, and sure enough, there was just dirt underneath it. And so that was kind of how I grew up. So we were pretty poor. So if we were going to eat, we grew pretty much everything we ate. So as these guys are telling me this, my first thought is, now here I'm a gospel preacher, but this is my background. My thought is, why don't you grow a garden? So I asked them, I said, why don't you grow a garden? They said, well, we don't know how. I said, what do you mean you don't know how to grow a garden? That's dirt, seed, plant, water, weed, pick, eat. And they said, we haven't raised a garden in several generations in our family. And I said, well, that's terrible. What if I could train you guys how to do that? And I just kind of did it off the cuff. And so classes ended at 4:00 every day. And I said, what if at 4:30 we started an agricultural class? I'll teach you how to raise a garden. If we have enough time, I'll teach you how to raise chickens. I'll teach you how to raise rabbits, how to build a compost pit, and how to turn manure into free fertilizer. And they said that would be awesome. So from 4:30 to 8:30 every day, we did an agricultural course there at the school. And now Kathmandu is a big city, millions and millions and millions of people. It's very crowded, very congested, but it's a Hindu city. And the Hindu religion believes that your grandpa is a cow or a goat or a chicken, or if he was a really bad person, he might come back as a snake or a worm. And everywhere in the city are cows laying in the streets. They'll just rest in the street, and they'll have cars backed up for miles because nobody will get out and move grandpa because, it's not nice. So every day, now I grew up, if we passed a cattle truck when I was growing up and you smelled it, my daddy would say, that smells like money. And so everywhere I looked in this city, I saw cows making money. And so I knew where they were all asking me, what about fertilizer? And I knew where to get fertilizer because it was everywhere in the city. Everywhere you walked, it was there. So one night we actually took 26 students and we all had a 5-gallon bucket and we all had a shovel and we walked through the city streets picking up manure, and people thought, this crazy white guy there, what is he doing? But here's what happened. Several of those students went back after they graduated. They learned to grow a garden. Several of them raised rabbits, and they were able to produce enough food for their family to survive much better, and they were able to stay preaching. And so I came home with a kind of a burr in my seat, and I thought, man, I think I could really do something to help the mission field here. I wonder how many mission workers are out there in the mission field today that don't know how to support themselves, and maybe they're not doing mission work anymore because they can't support themselves. So what if I could help them do that? So we began doing that, and we began teaching preaching school students, spent several trips going to the Andrew Connolly School of Preaching, helping them learn how to grow food, trying to help those preachers learn to do that. This is some rabbit cages. You'll hear us talk a lot about rabbits. One of the reasons is rabbits are the superfood of the third world. I would just think with me briefly. How much noise does a rabbit make? And when you're teaching your kids, cows, they make the noise moo, and the pig, it oinks. When you get to the rabbit, okay, so it doesn't make noise. How much room does a rabbit take? Anybody ever raised a rabbit in a cage? It's about that much room. You know what rabbits eat? Just stuff that grows in your yard. You know what rabbits taste like? Come on, this one's easy. Yeah, there we go. Chicken. All right, y'all are catching on. And they reproduce like rabbits. There's a reason this is the superfood of the third world. Okay, one rabbit through her litters in 1 year produced more meat than a cow or a pig combined. That's an amazing fact. 0 cholesterol. And it's a meal ready to serve. It's the MRE of the mission field. Now you got to think, if you got a cow and you raise it and you're trying to support your family, but you don't have electricity and you don't have refrigeration and you butcher the cow, what are you going to do with all the cow? All that beef. What you going to do with it? You got to either eat it quickly or you got to give it away. Or you got to dehydrate it. You got to do something with it quickly. A rabbit, you just peel the skin, heat and serve. And it's awesome. And it tastes like chicken. So it's tremendous. So you got 1 meal's worth right there, prepackaged for you by God. So we teach a lot about rabbits, and this is us building some drip irrigation stuff, just using what they had. We teach a lot of classes on scrounging. This is us teaching about the moringa tree, the most nutritious plant on earth. We try to grow it all over, everywhere we go. If you have questions about that, come see me afterwards. We've taught in Cameroon. My dad was pretty ashamed of me. My dad's a cattle farmer, was most of all of his life. And I remember leaving to go on this trip to Watutu, Cameroon, and I had done a lot of research trying to find out what they wanted to grow there and what would grow there. And the preachers kept responding back, we'd love to grow snails. And so I tell my dad I'm going to Africa and I'm going to teach them how to grow snails. I'd done all this research and I'd hired some people to come actually teach the class, and I was going to get to learn as well and put it into practice. And my dad said, you're going to go teach them what? He was quite bothered that I had fallen so far from grace, I guess. And so we taught. Now, this is not an ordinary snail, okay? The snails that you see behind me, these are called the Admonition. It's the giant African snail. They get about this big, the size of a youth football. I don't recommend eating one. They taste about like an inner tube soaked in tomato juice. But a 5-gallon bucket of these snails is worth $50. And the average monthly income in Watutu is $25. Now tell me, would you grow snails if you could do double your income just by raising a little enclosure of snails and feeding them the refuse from your kitchen? Yeah, that's a big change. So we've done a lot of different things. We've worked with orphans in Haiti. We actually had to build an aquaponics unit. This isn't the first one we've done. I'll tell you a little bit about another one we've done on top of an orphanage because they didn't have any land to cultivate. And so where they were at, it was all rock and concrete. And so we went in on top of this orphanage and we built them an aquaponics unit. So we'd raise fish, and then in the buckets, we would raise tomatoes. And so the water from the fish tank would circulate through the tomatoes and come back and be filtered for the fish. And so they would raise fish and tomatoes together. And then they would take the tomatoes and they would trade those tomatoes for things like rice and beans and meat. Very, very productive system there. So you can see some of the produce of that later there. You guys helped us tremendously in 2015, if you remember, during the earthquake that happened in Tipling, Nepal. It epicentered there, and there were 6 congregations there that we helped tremendously. That was probably one of the most difficult things we've ever done, but it was one of the most rewarding. Those 6 congregations, there's 6 villages in the Tipling area, and every person in those villages is a member of the church, which is, I've never been to a place quite like this. And there was a lot of need there. And so we were able to carry a lot of help and a lot of aid there. 2016, we built our first preaching school, and it was in Uganda. We built it from the ground up. It's no longer in operation. We actually closed it down in January. Thankfully, if you keep up with world news and know where Ebola is located right now in the world, it is literally in the village that our preaching school was in. And so we would have had to have closed it down anyway. My wife and children and myself went to Chamala. We spent about 6 months out of a year for several years going back and forth to Chamala, working with the mission farm there. Of course, raising rabbits, teaching them to grow food for the mission, raised a lot of produce, acres and acres of things like eggplant, things like squash and zucchini, teaching them to raise green beans and different things. You might find this surprising. When we would raise squash, they would all go out and pick all the leaves. Now, I grew up eating squash. I love squash. I love yellow squash. I love every form of yellow squash. And I would get really excited when I would see the blooms and I would see the fruit, but they didn't get excited about that. They got excited about the leaves. They would take the leaves and they would boil the leaves down and make greens out of the leaves. Did you know you could eat squash leaves like greens? They love that. They actually thought that squash was poisonous. And so they watched us very concerned as we ate a squash. And so I had them all over the house one day. And I said, we had 15 mission farm workers. I said, come over to the house. I'm going to show you how to grow squash or to eat squash. And they all watched thinking we were going to, keel over at any moment as we ate it. And then I put a toothpick in little pieces and handed it around, and they would all look at me like, there's no way I'm putting this in my mouth. And finally, one of them ate it, and he said, this is so good. And the next one, he ate it. And the next thing I know, I look over, and one of the guys has got the pot that we had cooked it with bacon and onion like you're supposed to. And he had tilted that pot up and was drinking the juice that was left. He thought that was pretty awesome. We've taught a lot of classes, a lot of varieties. We teach over 90 varieties of agricultural classes now. This was one we did in Myanmar, teaching how to raise mushrooms to the local preachers there, mushrooms being a high-priced commodity for them. Anything we can do to help encourage them and strengthen them so that they can stay in the field preaching, that's what we want to do. In 2018, we built our second preaching school. This one is healthy and thriving. It's in Eastern Africa in Tanzania. It's called the Talawanda School of Preaching. It's very bush. If you'll notice behind me, we have huts for our school dorms. We don't want to build fancy American facilities there. We want them to leave their home and go to a school that's very similar to what home is like, because we want them to go back to their village. That's very important. And so we don't give stipends to our students. Matter of fact, our students have to work every day on the farm for an hour every day. And so they all help in the producing of the food that they eat every day at the school. We're located in a very Muslim-centered area. And I want to encourage you to, when you're thinking about mission work in the mission field, to be thinking about getting the gospel into Muslim-dominated areas, brethren. You look on the news right now and you'll see all about Iran and all these places that we're constantly battling. And most of it comes from Islam. And we get very terrified by that. We get very bothered by that, and almost to the point where we resent them and we don't want to go teach them the gospel. And I've had multiple people tell me, why would you go to somewhere where there's Muslims? Don't they want to cut your head off? And I tell that person, you've watched too much Fox News. Okay. Brethren, on the day of judgment, when we stand before Jesus Christ and we give an account for the things we've done in this body, one of the things we're going to be held accountable for is who we spread the gospel to, and that's going to include Muslims. And we have had tremendous success reaching the Muslims. Matter of fact, the very first convert we had in this area, his name was Baraka. He was our taxi driver driving us to the land when we were going to go look at it. He had a radio in the cab, and he had it turned on to a radio station, and it was playing an American preaching, and I could just barely hear it. And having spent so much time in Memphis in my life, I recognized the voice very quickly. It was that of the Baptist preacher, Adrian Rogers, very distinct voice. And I asked him, I said, are you, and he had a Muslim hat on, full garb. I said, Baraka, I said, aren't you Muslim? And he said, oh, yes. And I said, but you're listening to a Christian from America preach. I know he's not a Christian, but for our conversation at that moment, he was. And he said, oh, yes, I love him. I love Christianity. I'm confused. And I said, Baraka, do you want to learn more about Christianity? Yes, would you teach me? Hook, line, sinker, right? And we baptized Baraka on that trip. And he became one of our first students, and now he's a gospel preacher in that area. He went back to his Muslim-dominated village and planted a congregation. Let me tell you, all our students, almost all of them come from Islam. We don't get many students from the church that want to enroll at our school. It's not fancy. They have to work on a farm, and they get no stipend. So when we send out applications to churches for students to come to our preaching school, guess what? Nobody signs up. But we get a lot of applications filled out by Muslims. So what we did is we extended our school out by 1 quarter, and we opened it up to them if they wanted to come to school. And we said this, if they will convert by the end of the first quarter, we'll keep them on as students. If they don't, we'll just send them home, no harm, no foul. So our first quarter, we opened it up. We had 13 students graduate from that class. All of them came out of Islam. Those men have now gone back and planted congregations in their villages that never had the church and are controlled by Islam. Brethren, we can make an impact in the world in places that are even scary, such as Eastern Tanzania. We're doing a lot of work down in Central America now. Been working a lot in Honduras. Matter of fact, our family is leaving tomorrow. I'm going to just kind of fast forward here to get where I really wanted to. We'll be heading, my wife and I will be heading to El Salvador. We've got a lady from Forest Hill, or 2 ladies from Forest Hill that will be going with us this week to El Salvador. We have a group trip there. One of the things my wife has been doing is she's been teaching sewing classes in El Salvador. There are a large number of women that are widowed in El Salvador that would love to learn how to make some money for themselves, and they don't know how. And so they can learn to do things. And it was weird. When I announced that we could do some classes there, including sewing, this widow woman, as soon as it was over, she like bull rushed up to my wife and just and she started talking to her in Spanish. My wife can speak a little Spanish, but not a lot. And so our translator's trying to kind of get in there and help. And she's telling her, please teach me how to make mop heads. Please teach me how to make mop heads. Please teach me how to make mop heads. And what she wanted to do was learn how to make this mop head out of a towel that everybody buys, I guess, at the market there for about $3 or $4. And that's a very lucrative concept for her because it doesn't take a lot of time to make, doesn't take much resource to make, but she can make a lot of them in a day and make a good income. And so she was very excited. Matter of fact, our biggest classes now that we teach around the world are our sewing classes. They are packed. They love when my wife teaches sewing. And so we've been doing a lot of that. Here recently, we use a lot of old Singer sewing machines. If you remember the old, what my grandma would call the horsehead sewing machine, the blackhead Singer, even using treadle sewing machines. And so I've learned to become quite the sewing machine mechanic as well. We've been teaching a lot of beekeeping classes to preachers and members of the church down there. This is called the top bar beehive. It doesn't look anything like what we would use here traditionally. I have some in my house, but not most people don't. one of the things we have is at the church in Apopa, El Salvador, we've helped them build a giant aquaponics unit. So aquaponics, you have fish in water tanks, and that water is pumped into buckets or beds where that water goes through and the roots reach down into the water and pull the nutrients out, and they grow lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, things. And so Victor, Abrego, who works down there in El Salvador, asked us if we'd help him and the church there build an aquaponics unit. Victor's story is pretty unique. If you know anything about El Salvador, for the last 7 years, they've been relatively safe compared to what they were before. Considering how unsafe it was the most dangerous country on earth for about 20 years up to that. And he lived at the junction in San Salvador where MS-13 gang owned, and their house sat on the property line of where the 18th Street gang owned. So they were in the crosshairs of a gang war incessantly. And somebody came and taught Victor as he was being recruited into the 18th Street gang at the same time. Somebody else came and taught him the gospel, and he was able to get out of that. He became a gospel preacher eventually. And I'll tell you, Victor's pretty awesome. He's very tech savvy. He has his own YouTube channel. He has his own, Facebook channel where he teaches the gospel online. He's just a tremendous worker. But we found out this year that somebody that was supporting him heavily, pretty much all of his support, was coming from a group that was pretending to be the Church of Christ in El Salvador, and they were not. They were the Christian church. And they had been deceiving people all over El Salvador. When this came to light and I exposed that, it caused a problem for Victor. They cut him off in support. And so Victor is now very encouraged to be self-supporting because he lost his support from America. And so what we've done is we've built this giant aquaponics unit. There's my fancy schematic. I'm sure everybody could build an aquaponics unit just from that drawing, right? So there's another man there that preaches at the church at Apopa as well. His name is Rudy. And Rudy is a brick mason and a very good one at that. And so he is standing on some tanks that we had just built for our fish. We have about 4,000 gallons of water for our fish there. What I'm working on there with that barrel is a filter system. Now, mind you, when we're in a place like this, we just have to use the resources that are available. You don't go down to Tractor Supply or get on Amazon and just order parts. You kind of have to, jerry rig everything. And thankfully, I'm good at scrounging and jerry rigging. This is us crushing volcanic rock that we had to go dig out of a volcanic flow. Which if you've never done that, that's quite the experience as well. But this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow plants in this system. Here's cucumbers growing in one of the raft systems. There's some of the cucumbers. If you see them yellowing a little, your eyes are not deceiving you. They are. That's because they're in an aquaponics unit. There's some minerals that are often hard to get. And one of those is iron chelate, which makes the leaves yellow, but the stems stay really green. But they produce quite a bit of cucumbers for them and tomatoes we've got there. We started with 26 fish, and right now we have about 4,000 fish in the system. We've had about 5 or 6 hatchings of fish from our system. We did not expect to have that. We thought we were just going to buy fish each round, fingerlings, and start them. We haven't had to do that at all. We did such a good job finally on something that it just overwhelmed us with fish. It's just tremendous. Matter of fact, Victor called me one morning, and he's a very excitable person. And he calls me and he says, "Gage." And I said, "Yeah, man." And he speaks great English. He says, "Watch this." And he takes his phone and he shoves it down into the water. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he gets it and he goes, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Well, I saw water." And he said, "Look." And he shoves it back down there again. I said, "Victor, what is it?" And it was just thousands of little baby fish. And he was so excited. And if you're wondering, yes, it killed his phone. But that's how excited he was. But right now I think we've got about 4,000 fish in our system, which is tremendous. Matter of fact, he's going to start selling fish as fingerlings to some local tilapia farmers in the area, which is pretty cool. One of the things we do is we have the School of Church Growth, and this is a very integral part of our work. You can find this on our mannafarm.org website, and it's under School of Church Growth if you click it. And it is a school where we train people daily in the Bible. And what it is this is something any person, you could do this if you wanted it. And I get this question all the time. I'll do gospel meetings or preach somewhere, and somebody will say, I really want to study the Bible more, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do each day. What do I do? And so what we've done is we've broken our curriculum down into a 12-month program, each month having a different subject. So the first year is all about the church. And the reason we did that is most of these congregations that we work with around the world are new, and they're struggling to grow, and they're struggling to have an identity. And as members of the Lord's church, brethren, we ought to have the most serious identity understanding of anybody in the world. When people ask us about the Lord's church, you ought to be able to say, how much time do you have? Because we ought to be excited to tell them about God's church that he built, that he sent his son to purchase with his blood. That ought to be something that excites us. We ought to be able to tell and take people back to some prophecies of the Old Testament and show how God prophesied. Every member of the church, listen, can do this. So what we've done is every day there's a memory verse, one memory verse. And it's all centered on it. Like, for example, on this one, you've got the Ephesians 3 and verse 11 verse. It's not very long, according to his eternal purpose as he purchased in Christ Jesus, our Lord. Very short. But there's some important facts there. And then there's a Bible reading there. And then each week, there's a section that you can go through and you can read all about the Lord's church. And all of it pertains to those Bible verses you memorized and those Bible verses you read. And so the whole first month is just, what is the New Testament church? Month 2, what is the work of the church? Month 3, what is, the organization of the church? You got the elders. Month 4 is the deacons. Month 5 is preachers. You think about month 6. Now, we know who we are and how we're to be organized. What is our main goal? Well, we're to be evangelistic. How do we do that? Okay. Month 7 is going to be protecting against false teachers. Month 8 is going to be, you got a group of people together. Guess what's going to happen? Any group of people. Yeah. You're going to have disagreements and division. How do you deal with that? How do you prepare for it? And how do you handle it when it comes? And so you're memorizing your way through this. You're reading your way through this. Are you going to be growing as a congregation? Absolutely. Month 9 is going to be about growing godly homes. Month 10 is going to be about sacrificial giving. Month 11 is going to be all about training up the next generation in the Lord's church to be faithful. And then month 12 is going to be about replication. There used to be a time when in the Lord's church in America, we were very concerned with getting the church to the next town. That was going to be a big concern to us. We'd go into a town and we'd say, there's not a Lord's church here. And so what we would do is we would take 10 or 15 people from a congregation and we'd say, we're going to get you ready and we're going to go over there and we're going to rent a room and we're going to plant the Lord's church I live in Moscow. Anybody been to the Moscow Church of Christ? You know why you haven't? Because it doesn't exist. Should it? Absolutely. See, we need to be thinking, how can we replicate to Moscow? And so we do this all over the world. Well, I don't know why we're not doing it here anymore. We need, and it's because we've become very inward focused in the Lord's church. We're just trying to keep our lights on. Anybody heard that kind of statement? Maybe we're trying to keep our lights on because that's all we're trying to do. See, God blesses us when we reach out, not when we reach in. Do you ever read about that in the New Testament? See, the Lord's church always grew and multiplied when the word was spread and when people spread out. And so that's kind of the last concept there. And so you can click off, and show each verse that you've read and memorized. And so it keeps track of it. There's even a place, if you, look up at the top right, it's kind of small on the screen, but it says prayer. You can click on that. It's going to give you an opportunity, once you're signed into this, that you can put in a prayer request. And it goes to everybody that's in the School of Church Growth. So when they sign in every day to do their Bible reading, their Bible memory verse, it's going to show them that you have a prayer request. Maybe your wife's sick. And then that person can click that they've prayed for that. There's a little button right below it that says, I prayed for this. And that night, you're going to get a message that says, 355 people prayed for your wife. How great would that be if we could get, more prayer, more Bible study, more reading, and more growth? So right now in El Salvador, there's a preacher there that we're working with. His name is William, and he and I have been communicating the last day. He's got 275 preachers and congregations signed up for an evangelistic school of church growth program in El Salvador over the next 3 months, where we're going to be getting this in over 200 congregations. That's tremendous, brethren. It's a tremendous opportunity to help churches grow the way that the Bible says. I think it's interesting. Almost every time when you read the New Testament church growing in the book of Acts, it says, and the word of God spread. It doesn't say that people were just tremendous evangelists. It says when the word spread, then the church multiplied. Every week I get a report. It tells me how many students we have. This is old now, but how many congregations are enrolled, how many verses are memorized, how many verses have been read, how many people have stopped doing it. I like to know that so I can reach out to them and encourage them. So it's easy to find there on our website. But I've got just 10 minutes, I guess. 20, is that right? Okay, that's awesome. Okay. So for years we have, and you've seen from the presentation tonight, we travel all over the world training men to preach, and we train them how to be self-supporting. But we've had a dream, and it didn't start but very long after I started doing this work. Thought, man, how great would it be if we had a place where we could bring people from all over the world and train them, any missionary worker, whether they're from Africa, Asia, South America, or America. How great would it if we could train them in one place? And over the last couple of years, we've really prayed about this, talked about this, and the elders in Forest Hill and I have met and talked about it. And this year we decided we're going to make this a reality. And so we began looking for property all through Central America. We wanted something close to America where we could fly back and forth quickly, easily, and inexpensively. And so we began looking in places that we were already working: Honduras, El Salvador, Panama. We were looking in places people, suggest, man, you ought to go look in Costa Rica. And we began looking around, and we found very high prices in Central America. Land is about what it is here in Collierville. We were looking at property that was very remote in Honduras that was $25,000 an acre, and it was on the side of a mountain like this. And so, man, I thought, man, there's just no way that we can feasibly buy what we need to do what we want to do. And then somebody recommended I need to look at Belize. So I did, and I began looking at land prices, and I began looking for the church there. And I found two things. I found that land was readily available, inexpensive, and tremendous, and the church was almost non-existent. And that fit really two of the things we wanted to do. We wanted to go to a place, not because the church was there, but because the church wasn't there. And so there are about 7 congregations that are faithful in the Lord's church in Belize. And Belize is not an enormous country. It's a country of about 450,000 people. It's about the size of New Hampshire. But there is one whole side of that country that has never had the Lord's church in it. And so we have found some property on that side of the country, and we're in the process of trying to buy 31 acres there. There is a little place there called Spanish Lookout. It's about 30 minutes from Guatemala. It's about 2 hours from Mexico, and it's about an hour and a half from the coast. The property has a year-round spring that produces beautiful clear water. It's kind of in the middle of the property there, and it runs down through this valley on the property. It already has an existing cabana. It has 2 already built tilapia ponds that are stocked on it. It's got over 150 coconut trees. It's got 56 giant mango trees. And I'm not saying that the trees are enormous, but they grow the big mangoes. If you travel the world, you know that there's mangoes that are about that big, and they're good, but they don't produce much. But then there's giant mangoes, and they're really sweet and awesome. There's a bunch of those. There's soursop trees. There's 2 acres of vanilla. Anybody know what the most expensive spice on earth is right now? Vanilla. 2 acres of vanilla at ground floor pricing right now. And if you just do a mediocre job of curing it, is worth about $80,000 a year. There's already 2 acres of vanilla on the property. There are, it's completely fenced in and cross fenced for cattle. There is a 32 by 32 pig barn with 9 pig stalls, concrete floors, everything in it. Tremendous property. It's beautiful. It's at the end of a dead end road. So it's very safe for us. It's, as the crow flies, it's about 9 miles from the capital city of Belmopan, but it takes 45 minutes to get there because it's Belize. You can kind of see the property here. I'll kind of be quiet as it goes through here. But I'll show you here in a second when it pops up. This is the cabana. It's never been finished. So we're going to finish it and we're going to enlarge it for the first house there for people that are working there to stay. It is up on I did not realize that even had sound with it. I've been to a lot of churches and given a lot of presentations and nobody ever has sound capability. So I didn't even realize this had sound. That's awesome. It's got cashews. It's got chickens. There's some of the tilapia ponds. Matter of fact, the water table's at 7 foot. When they hit 7 foot, when they were digging the tilapia ponds, they started filling with water. Everything's sub-irrigated on the property as well. There you can kind of get a pretty good picture of what it looks like there. You might ask, what are we going to do on this? So our dream is that we can set up everything that we teach agriculturally and vocationally and biblically. We're going to build a Bible training school there that'll at least be part-time. We're going to have a giant hacienda there that'll be a big U-shaped house where any mission worker that's coming down to train and work with us can stay. All our teachers can go down there and stay. Anybody that's going down there to do evangelism can stay and have a nice house. We're hoping to build 6 bedrooms, on the wings and have 1 central living, kitchen, and dining area for everybody. Then we're going to build bungalows across the property. And the reason we want to build some bungalows across the property is we want to do a soft landing for missionaries. A lot of people go on mission trips for 2 or 3 weeks and they decide, I want to go and be a missionary. This would be excellent. And the husband comes home and he says, honey, I think we're going to go do mission work. And she's a good wife. And she says, okay. And about 3-4 months into doing mission work, she comes to him and says, take me home. You know what she misses? She misses Walmart. She misses all of the conveniences, hot water. She misses air conditioning. She misses her car and good roads and people that speak her language. Her kids miss that. They miss mama and grandmama, and they miss all the, food wrapped in cellophane at the grocery store. They don't like going to the market and seeing meat hanging with flies buzzing. And it's hard to do mission work. And so they're not taught, especially in difficult places, how to adapt to that, overcome culture shock and language shock, and just how to adapt to missing home, even how to do the work. There's a lot of things you do in the mission field that you don't do in local work in America. So a lot of guys will leave local work and go do mission work, but they don't know how to turn a wrench. And if you don't know how to turn a wrench in the mission field, you're probably not going to be very successful very long. You've got to be able to fix your own car when the belt breaks and the tires give out on a back road or a goat trail that you're driving down, trying to get somewhere. You've got to be pretty adept at being able to handle those kind of situations. And so we want to create a place where we can send our missionaries that are going into the mission field so they can be trained for 6 months to a year and give them a soft landing in the mission field to prepare them. And here's the other side of it. If after a few months they say, you know what? This isn't for us. That's a no harm, no foul moment because they haven't sold the dog and they haven't sold the house and they haven't sold the car and they haven't raised $200,000 so they can get moved and do everything. That's, by the way, that's the average cost to get somebody in the mission field. Here's another staggering statistic. Across Christendom, I'm going to use a broad term here. The average missionary lasts 2 years. 70% of marriages in missionary homes end in divorce. 90% of kids from missionaries end up lost. I think we need to do a better job preparing our missionaries. So that's our goal. We want to build a facility where they can come down and they can learn everything that we've had to learn the hard way over the last 16 years. Give them a place where they can do that. And so I'm going to just fast forward to my final plea here. So we're trying to raise $200,000 right now. That gives us the ability to buy the land. It gives us the ability to dig a water well for the property, to put in a small solar farm because there's no electricity anywhere in the bush in Belize. So we're going to have to build our own solar panel farm there. We're going to buy a couple vehicles for the facility, and we're going to buy a brick building machine that makes these giant bricks that look like Legos. If you like Legos, they're awesome. And they stack like Legos. They make building very efficient, cost effective. It costs about $10,000 to buy the machine. So we're trying to get $200,000. This is a one-time investment, but we believe it's an investment in the Lord's church, and it's an opportunity for all of us. You know, we have invested in missionaries for years. Why don't we invest in an opportunity to train those missionaries better and equip them better? And any mission worker in the world that wants to come there and learn what we teach and how to do it, we're going to help them come there. We'll let them stay as long as they need to learn as much as they want, and then they can go back fully equipped and trained. Instead of us trying to do it 2 weeks at a time in different places, we can bring people from all over the world. And so instead of us trying to go to 2 people or 3 people at a time, we can bring 30 in if we have the housing and we have the funds. And so what we're trying to do is get 40 congregations to help us with $5,000 one time. I know that's a stretch for some congregations, but you know what? I've been amazed. Almost every congregation I've gone to so far has said, we want to be a part of this. And then 2 or 3 individuals have come and said, we want to be a part in some way. And so let me encourage you, if you have the opportunity to help us, please do so. If you can't, pray for us. We solicit your prayers that this is a success. Several weeks ago, I had a conversation with a lady, and she said, you know, she was a professional fundraiser, and she said, you need to be looking for some big fish to make this happen. And I thought, well, yeah, that's great. No, but I don't know any big fish. But I told my wife on the way home I was going to pray for that. And I did. I started praying for that. And in the last week, several big fish have ended up in our net that are helping us in a big way. And I believe prayer works, brethren. I beseech you, pray for us in the field. We need it. Lord willing, next year, Walker's going to be and Aurora's going to be there with us, being able to help us set this up and get it going and be able to be trained themselves. So when they come there, thank you for letting me present this to you, this opportunity to you tonight. If you want to come see me afterwards, I'd be glad to talk with you more about it if you have any questions. There's a lot of people that support us by $50 a month. We're trying to get 1,000 supporters for our mission work at $50 a month. You can scan that QR code there, come see me. I've got some cards. I've got some flyers in the back as well if you want to see those that tell all about the Belize project. But once again, thank you for the support that you helped us with in 2015 and 16 with the Nepal work. But we solicit your prayers and your help with this as well. So thank you.